When is the last time you did a small kindness for somebody else?
The other people in my training were like, yeah, why not? Like, what's the harm? Like, why don't you do it and see how you feel? And it definitely, yeah, I think at times felt weird and uncomfortable. But I remember after just feeling a different type of good.
Hey there, it's Julie. Welcome to Uncomfy, a show about sticking with moments that challenge us even when they're uncomfortable. And I know you're probably wondering, why would anybody choose to be uncomfortable? But I know from personal experience, and you probably do too, that sometimes a little bit of discomfort has benefits if we can stay open and curious about it. And that is what we're here to explore. So let's get uncomfy. I'm joined by Nicole Karlis. She's an award-winning journalist and author, and she's got a new book called Your Brain on Altruism, The Power of Connection and Community During Times of Crisis. It was inspired, actually, by an uncomfy experience that she had. So I'm excited to talk through this with her. Nicole, welcome.
Hi, Julie. Thank you for having me.
So tell us about the origin story here. What was the situation that you were in where you began to start thinking more seriously about altruism?
Right. Yeah. So the story of my book begins about 10 years ago. I was in Rishikesh, India, doing a yoga teacher training. It was at the end of a personal kind of like backpacking, find yourself trip I was on. And at the time, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety. I was just kind of feeling a little lost in my life. And so one day, my teacher offered to take us to his Vedic astrologer, whose opinions he really respected. When, he was kind of going through difficult times, he would consult with this Vedic astrologer. And I went and I had to give my birthday and time of birth and, so he could make a birth chart for me. This was my first time doing something like this. But I was curious, to ask, how would you deal with anxiety if you were feeling really anxious and having a lot of uh, ruminating thoughts going on in your mind? And he looked at me and he wrote me essentially a prescription. And they were specifically to do acts of kindness. So one I remember was to go buy a bag of dry lentil beans and give it to someone who was begging on the street. And another one was to go buy a blanket and to go to this kind of like rehabilitation center where people who had leprosy were living, and to go donate the blanket to them. And I thought that was really interesting that that's how he told me to deal with my anxiety. And that was the first time that it occurred to me that there can be health benefits from being of service to others.
Yeah, you thought it was interesting, but in that moment, were you also a little skeptical or annoyed?
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
Yes,
come on, dude, I was asking
definitely.
you for help and you're just telling me to go buy lentils. Like, what?
Yeah,
What is this?
exactly. It felt definitely, yeah, counterintuitive, right? Like, probably I even was like, should I do this? Like, this is kind of, is it weird that I'm actually now going to go do this?
Yeah.
But I
So
tried
you decided
to,
you would go ahead and do it.
I did, yes, because the other people in my training were like, yeah, why not? Like, what's the harm? Like, why don't you do it and see how you feel? Um, so, yeah, I did. And I remember just trying to do it with the intention of like being aware of how I was feeling in that moment. And it definitely, yeah, I think at times felt weird and uncomfortable. But I remember after just feeling a different type of good, not feeling like, oh, I just had this amazing yoga class. But instead, like I had done something that had a purpose, that had a deeper purpose. And I, started to think, oh, we're living in this moment where self care has become really popular, where the wellness movement is becoming really popular. It's like a multi-trillion-dollar industry every year. And maybe people are paying all this money to feel good, but maybe another way to feel good is to actually like volunteer in your community and be of service to others. And then because I'm a health and science journalist, the wheel started turning. Are scientists studying this? So that's yeah, kind of the beginning of my book.
So then you went and did a bunch of research. What's something that you have learned about the effect that being kind to others, serving others actually has on? I mean, does it actually do something different in the brain than caring for yourself?
Yes, and in many ways it does. So, I mean, I think it's interesting because people think, doing something nice for someone else, it's kind of a fluffy, nice to have. I think if people think about altruism and health, they, yeah, like I said, think it's a nice to have, like not a must have. We think we have to have good nutrition, that we have to exercise. But when I was interviewing neuroscientists, they told me it is absolutely a must have for good brain health. And that's because it gives people a sense of purpose. And another thing is that neuroscientists have also found that giving to others, it can provide a like more durable type of pleasure per the brain's reward system, instead of just doing something nice for yourself.
Does the act of service itself matter? Do you get a bigger effect if it's more, if it's larger, or if it takes more effort, if it's more expensive, if it takes more time? You know what I'm saying?
Well, what I say is that it really depends. In my book, I write that people go through different seasons of their life as it pertains to altruism. So you can be either in a season of giving, a season of receiving, or even a season of witnessing. And we all benefit from all of those seasons. But then, especially when people are in a season of giving and are able to be of service more, and we see more of that, we hear more of that in our communities, we're all benefiting from that. It doesn't matter like how big the act is, but I usually say that if you're volunteering like with the same organization, once a week regularly, that's where you're going to have like the optimal health benefits that I talk about in my book. But that's not to say that, just giving where you can and when you can is still important to people's health.
Tell me more about why you would get the maximum health benefits if you were doing it with the same organization once a week.
Yeah, so there are a few reasons. And one is just like really obvious that usually volunteering requires you to be really physical. People can be, on their feet, running around, this organization, maybe moving things. It can be very social. So people are seeing the same people. And then it's also having that shared sense of purpose. And that's really what differentiates volunteering from joining some sort of like social club or hobby group. Like, yes, it is nice to do that. And those are necessary in our lives too. And, a lot of people have some sort of, social group for the same reasons that they might be drawn to volunteering in their community as well. But when you're, part of an organization and you have this shared purpose and you're all there to be of service to the community in some way, people really need that. There's a lot of research about there about like aging and how important it is to have a sense of purpose as you age. One of the researchers who I interview a lot in my book, and I mentioned his research, his name is Dr. Eric Kim. He has been researching purpose and aging for decades. And I've talked to him and asked him, like, is it actually volunteering that helps people have fewer hospital visits as they age, that they live longer because they're volunteering? And he says, absolutely, yes. Volunteering can help you live longer.
You spend a lot of time with a lot of people serving in a lot of different ways. Tell us about someone you met or a project that's ongoing that you learned a lot from.
Yeah, well, so I spent some time when I was doing research for my book on USC's campus in California, the University of Southern California, with the university's director of belonging. Her name is Kat Moore. She's moved on from that position now, but she was hired because they realized they had kind of a crisis on campus, that a lot of students were saying they didn't feel like they belonged. And it was also running parallel to, like a loneliness crisis among youth. And so I spent a weekend with her doing various activities. What does a director of belonging do on a college campus? And one activity was just having some students give out flowers to students. And one student, when she received a flower, just started bawling. And she was like, I have found it so hard to meet people on campus. I've been through so much. Like, I wouldn't have talked to anyone today if you hadn't reached out, to me. And it was just really a beautiful moment to see how altruism can be a catalyst for the deeper connections that we want. And just in that moment, that student who was having a hard time, she knew, she wasn't alone. People want to connect with you. People are thinking of you. And that all happened around just, one random act of kindness. And people remember those. And it actually, the science shows it inspires you to want to pay it forward and be more altruistic in your life as well.
So finally, Nicole Karlis, describe for me, if we were to wake up tomorrow in a community that was very aware of and focused on caring for one another, what would we see? What would we notice about what's going on in our community?
Well, I think we would notice that people were more willing to be kinder to each other, that they were more willing to be more patient with each other. I think people would be in better health. In the book, I talk about prioritizing caring in our society, the act of caring. And, we can't experience the benefits of being of service unless really I think there's systemic change, unless we have what I call a culture of caring. And it doesn't have to be massive, the change. It could just be, whoever is a leader in whatever industry or whatever their place is in this world, just by being kinder to people that you interact with, just by prioritizing caring and seeing it as a strength and not a weakness.
Nicole Karlis is an award-winning journalist and author of a new book called Your Brain on Altruism, The Power of Connection and Community During Times of Crisis. You can learn more about the book and about her work at Nicole M. Karlis, that's KARLIS.com. Nicole, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Julie.
And thank you for getting uncomfy with us today. I'd love to hear about an act of service, either one that you received or that you gave, that was maybe a little uncomfy. How did it go? And what are your thoughts now in hindsight? What can we learn from your experience? Send an email to uncomfy@byu.edu or connect with us on social media. We are at uncomfy.podcast on Instagram. Uncomfy is a BYU radio podcast. Samuel Benson produces it, and the team includes Hyobin Kim and Sam Payne. Our theme music was composed by Kelsey Ney. I'm Julie Rose. Can't wait to get uncomfy with you again next week. It's Julie. Hey, one quick thing to mention to you. I would love to recommend a podcast called In Good Faith. It's from the BYU Radio family of podcasts. It's hosted by Stephen Cat Perry. And this show is all about connecting with believers from various religions. On Uncomfy, we're looking to have hard conversations, and it doesn't get harder than talking about religion when you have different traditions and beliefs. And this podcast is just so cool because Stephen talks with people about their own personal faith journeys, people from all walks of life, Christians, Buddhists, Jews, Muslims, many, many more. And it's a chance to hear their stories in their own words. And I always come away with a deeper understanding both of their faith and of my own faith in listening to these conversations. Plus, Stephen's just a really well-traveled guy, so his unique global perspective adds this really great richness to every conversation. So check out In Good Faith. You can listen on all the podcast apps, and I'd love to hear what you think about it.